discuss some things that I think you'll find interesting is our good friend Kerby Anderson. Kerby is president of Probe Ministries. They are a Christian think tank, and they write and analyze issues from a biblical worldview basis, and they're based also, as Ray is, they're based in the Dallas area. Kerby also hosts the radio program Point of View, which is heard on American Family Radio Daily and on other great stations around the country, which is a Christian talk program. Kerby, good morning to you.
Good morning. Happy New Year to Tim and Ray. Great to be with you today.
Happy New Year, Kerby.
All right, Kerby, got to ask you, feel obligated. What's your breakfast of choice?
Today I had an orange, so I guess I'm a little different than the guys who
There you go. Well, I had orange juice.
Orange juice? That's
Yeah,
right.
no,
Orange juice.
I had
Yeah.
orange juice.
Going to eat some more after the show here, but I'm ready to go.
All
and
right,
we got
brother.
lots to talk about today in
Yeah, we do.
2014, don't we?
Yeah, we
Sounds
do.
funny to talk about 2014.
Doesn't it, though? 2014, whatever happened to the aughts, or whatever we called them. What do we call those years, 2001 to 10?
I wish we could come up with something because it's certainly hard. You're always saying 2001 or 2005 or whatever, but anyway.
Yeah.
2014, here we are, new year.
All right, let's get started with something that's in the news today, Kerby. There is a group of scientists in Antarctica on a ship, and they are studying the effects of global warming. And they are trapped. They're being rescued as we speak, I believe. But their ship, which got frozen, got stuck in ice. And don't you find that a little funny? And then nobody's lives in danger here, folks. So we're not laughing we're not laughing at tragedy.
No.
These guys are being rescued by helicopter.
They'll be safe. They'll be fine.
Yeah, they'll be fine. But the global warming scientists stuck in ice in Antarctica, which brings us to the whole idea of what have you been tracking this issue for several years? What do you think about this man-made global warming?
Well, first of all, let's talk about the fact that some people say, why are they down there during winter? Well, the bottom line is in the southern hemisphere, it's summer. So the bottom line is that probably the best time to look at the ice in Antarctica would be right now, which is winter for us in the northern hemisphere, southern there. And there is less ice in Antarctica. But as soon as I say that, there is more ice in the Arctic than has ever been before. The whole Arctic ice cap is growing when it should have been shrinking. So it's a good example, Tim and Ray, that when you look at some of the facts, there were predictions made, and let's, if we can, go back to the film that was done by Al Gore. Remember this, The Inconvenient Truth. And Inconvenient Truth came out, and he predicted that if global warming would be taking place, that the oceans would rise 20 feet because all of this ice would melt. And then you had this interesting animation that showed Manhattan flooding and lots of Miami flooding and whole countries going out of existence, islands being flooded and the rest. Of course, that's not what has happened at all, because if anything, it's if the ocean levels have gone up at all, some people say maybe a foot over the last 2 centuries, and certainly not 20 feet. And now that you see the ice is returning to the Arctic, you can't make that claim anymore. So all these predictions, whether it's Al Gore, whether it was the predictions made by the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, none of them have been borne out. And I think anybody that wants to step outside, Tim and Ray, you ready to step outside right now and see how cold it is outside? It doesn't exactly feel like global warming, does it?
No, we're having record lows, Ray. Now, you got to be careful to not extrapolate something as like global warming to, the temperature today where you live. But at the same time, the trends in North America and in Europe have both been cooling, Ray.
Well, Kerby, isn't it true that that there are long-term cycles that the Earth, I mean, if you look back over hundreds of years, that there are periods where it does get a little warmer and then periods where it does get a little cooler, so that some of what we're seeing that they call climate change is just the normal cyclical change in the Earth's atmosphere?
I think so. And some of that has to do, obviously, with the sun itself. There are many people that have looked at this and say that the sun seems a little brighter than it was a few hundred years ago, but you go further back and you had kind of a medieval warming period. Now, we all learned when we had geography that Iceland doesn't have ice and Greenland has ice, but there was a time in which there wasn't much ice on Greenland, where there was a much easier time for the Vikings and others to settle. There was a time when it was so warm that it was quite easy to raise grapes and make wine in England compared to, of course, today, where mostly we do it in places like France. And so you can see that there have been times when it has been very warm in the past. And during the Middle Ages, Tim and Ray, we didn't have SUVs, we didn't have coal-fired plants, and you can't really blame those kind of cyclical variations on anything other than the variations of climate and maybe differences in terms of whether or not you had sunspots or various kinds of solar activity that took place. So when people say, do you believe in climate change, I say yes, because the climate has always been changing. But that's not what they're getting at. They've changed it from global warming to climate change because they want to say, well, if you believe the climate's changing, then you also then have to accept that our human activity is affecting it. And it's possible that it's affected a little bit, but not as much as many of these doomsayers were saying that it was going to affect it. And here we are in 2014 now, where a lot of people are dealing with pretty cold temperatures, not the kind of warm temperatures we were being told that we would be facing by now.
Yeah, I was always skeptical of the man-made global warming. If you're going to tell me, but global warming itself has not been going on for, 10 to 20 years? You can't document any kind of warming.
We seem to have a lull.
Yeah. So, I mean, you would think if the global warming argument is correct, that it's carbon emissions and man-made, that it would still be happening. But you're right. About 5 years ago, they switched over from the term, by they, I mean, those who are pushing this idea of man-made global warming. They decided, hey, global warming, that phrase isn't working for us because it isn't happening. And so we need to go to something else. So they changed it to climate change. And like you, Ray, and Kerby, I'm going, climate change? We've had climate change since God created the earth. So that doesn't say anything. I think a lot of this is money that these scientists get from government grants. And if they got to have a cause. This is what I think we're getting down. They got to have a cause to get these grants, so they're going to insist that global warming, is taking place, man-made global warming, in order to continue to get the grants from, I guess, foundations and or governments to study something that doesn't seem to exist anymore, Kerby.
Well, that's the other thing is that, Al Gore and others have made a big deal about some of the people that have disagreed with global warming maybe in one way or another being paid by oil companies. And that is true, by the way. There are some times that you can go to some of these think tanks and they're just kind of a shell company to emphasize that this is not a problem. But they don't talk about the other part, and that is you will receive grants for various kinds of research if you're in those hot topics. Cancer is one. For a while, AIDS was one. But right now, without a doubt, global warming. And if you're going to be a meteorologist, you're going to put together climate models based upon global warming, you have a much better chance of getting funding. And, of course, if you are convinced that we need to move to a globalist solution, then the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change doesn't want to talk about the fact that, well, this isn't really that much of a problem. They want to say it's a really big problem. That's why we need global government. That's why we need to have carbon tax. That's why we need to have cap and trade. Right. And, of course, you can see the impact that could have on our economy.
What exactly, Kerby, is this carbon tax that they'd like to impose on us? And
is this a federal government, or is this some sort of international tax?
Well, right now we have an attempt by this administration to try to come up with some way in which they can implement this, because after all, you're never going to get a cap and trade, I don't think, or carbon tax passed by the United States Senate or the House. So the argument is that maybe they can find a way to impose some of this surreptitiously through the EPA, and they already have certain regulations on various coal-fired plants. But the bottom line, to answer Ray's question real quickly, is that certain kind of carbon is seen as dangerous. So carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, so anything that produces that, you would have to pay an additional tax. Basically what it would do is drive those industries that produce carbon dioxide out of business. It would be energy production facilities. Of course, it would require various kind of emission controls on cars and those kinds of things. But the bottom line is it sees carbon dioxide as a pollutant. And if you have to roll your eyes at that, recognize that even the Supreme Court seemed to actually demonstrate that. Well, carbon dioxide is what is coming out of the three of our mouths, along with a lot of other things right now. But carbon dioxide is also what the plants around us right now take in and use for photosynthesis. So to say that that is a poison akin to, say, carbon monoxide or sulfur dioxide, I think is the biggest problem we have right now, because anything that has carbon in it is seen as bad. And the argument that is given by this administration and certainly by the globalists is we need to move to solar power, we need to move to wind power, but that's a real difficult way to get your car moving tomorrow as you go out of the driveway and go out to shop or go to the grocery store or decide to go to school.
Kerby, are we likely to see much political movement from the White House in the climate change area, global warming area this year, or will the focus still be almost exclusively on Obamacare?
I think there's going to be some push there on both. This is an administration that can walk and chew gum, first of all, so they can be doing one or two things. I mean, I think if I can make some predictions, like we're going to hear more about immigration this year. We'll have some pushback on Obamacare. I think there are already, as I'm alluded to, there are some various regulations that have been put out by the Environmental Protection Agency. Of course, there are various treaties. I know in just a minute, Tim, you want to talk about the Senate race. We've got a number of these treaties just sort of hanging out there. And if you could get a completely veto-proof Senate in one direction, which would prevent the president from enacting his agenda, that would be one direction. But, of course, the administration right now wants to get more Democrats in there so they could get the requisite two-thirds vote necessary so that some of these treaties that have been hanging around since the days of Jesse Helms, a few of these treaties have been around for a long, long time, you could actually get them passed. So I do believe that part of that is that the president recognizes he may not be able to push much through Congress, so I think he's going to push it through executive orders, push it through the administration. But the real big question on this really important year of 2014 is what happens in these Senate elections. If indeed the Republicans take over the Senate, that changes everything. If more Democrats are elected to the Senate and you have what essentially are almost two-thirds, or at least you could maybe pick off a few Republicans, some of these treaties, the Law of the Sea Treaty and of some of these environmental treaties could all be implemented, and that would be a very different America than the one that we're experiencing right now.
You're listening to the radio program Today's Issues on the American Family Radio Network. I'm Tim Wildman. You were listening there to Kerby Anderson and Ray Pritchard co-hosting the program with me today. Kerby, where do you